it struck me, this was several months ago, and it turns out we largely are sitting at a time that was very similar to Wi-Fi or building connectivity about 25 years ago. So in the early 2000s, right around 2000, 2001, about 3% of buildings had Wi-Fi ready to go within the building. And today that's about 98%. It's pretty incomprehensible to walk into a building and not be able to have some level of connectivity. And similarly in on-site energy systems, we're sitting at a little over 3% of businesses have an on-site energy system. And I believe over the next 25 years, it will follow a similar trend to Wi-Fi, where in the future, it won't be questioned whether or not we will be having on-site energy systems. It'll just be essentially a part of being able to control your own destiny.
Well, Dan, it's been a while since we got to hang out and record one of these. How are you?
Doing very well. I was actually just thinking that we've had quite a few awesome guests of late, which has been really good. We're always loving to share other people's insights, but it's nice to get one with the two of us. And I think we've got an awesome subject today that we'll be digging into. But first, how things been going outside of VECKTA, outside of Renewable Rides?
Yeah, things have been great. We had a bit of smoke for a while here, and we'll talk about that in a minute in terms of the heat waves and wildfires. But really good. Been enjoying some really nice long backcountry rides with the family on the mountain bikes, which has been awesome. We checked out the county fair this weekend to tap into the community, and just travel has wound down as kind of we've come into summer and everyone's off busy, so less conferences and just enjoying some family time, getting fit again, eating a bit healthier. So yeah, life's good. How about you? You enjoyed a birthday?
I did.
Or a few birthdays.
Yeah, coming off a couple. We had a good celebration for Kristen a couple weeks back, and then I just got, as you all know, a couple days away to do some golf with some buddies of mine. Some of which were down from San Francisco, out from New York, and I got to play Torrey Pines for the first time, which was a big highlight for me. So I really thoroughly enjoyed that. It was nice to refresh, to gear up for coming into fall here. So it's been a lot of fun. On the kind of the broader industry front, is there anything before we get into our topic today that's caught your attention?
Well, I mentioned heat waves and wildfires, and obviously that's front of mind, especially for everyone on the West Coast right now. There's a lot of activity, especially with Spokane burning as we speak, which is shocking. And, we're not alone here in the US, like Europe's been suffering similar issues. But I think one headline that caught my attention was, we see and hear a lot of press about nuclear needing to be more prominent in our future. But there's an article about in Hungary, their only nuclear power plant is at risk of needing to be shut down because the Danube River is extremely low water levels, and they obviously need the water to be able to cool the facility. And even if they shut it down, they'd still need a lot of water to just keep it cool. And so it just highlights, doesn't it, another risk of some of these technologies and their reliance on environmental factors. And all roads keep pointing back to, if you can put a static solar panel on your roof and a battery, and they don't need any of those environmental inputs. And in fact, the hotter it gets and the more sunshine you get, the better your outcomes. It's very interesting to see some of these sort of out there stories. How about you?
For me, well, one, I agree with you, and two, have certainly been monitoring the wildfires. There was actually just one 2 days ago in up in Mendocino County, up near where I grew up, that I was monitoring pretty closely. It got up to about 850 acres, and luckily they've been able to knock most of it down at this point. But it's been pretty crazy. I've also been very impressed by they all have a UC San Diego marking on them, but the use of AI to monitor these kind of rural mountain-based cameras for any smoke, and then being able to get the particularly the airstrikes on them quickly.
Yeah.
But for me, I had an interesting conversation about 2 weeks ago with a gentleman that inbounded on our website, particularly up in Tahoe. This guy manages about 15 different hotels in the South Lake Tahoe area. And so we had a good conversation around his desire to explore on-site solar, potentially batteries. But when I asked him what the driver was behind it, I figured the standard answer of, well, rising utility costs, which was part of his answer, but the other part was really a concern over whether or not they were going to have any power in a year or 2 years' time, on the heels of the announcement from NV Energy that they were no longer going to support Liberty Utilities, which serves the Lake Tahoe area, because
Yep.
of the need to divert power for these large AI data centers in the kind of the greater Reno area. And it was the first one where I spoke to someone that said that was genuinely concerned over these headlines. And again, I think it's a bit of a canary in the coal mine, but it's real people's lives and businesses that are going to be impacted. So be curious to see how it plays out over the coming
Yeah.
year or two. But again, being able to take matters into your own hand and at least generate a good portion of it on site is people are looking for those options now.
Yeah. And actually, it's an article. I wrote an article on that topic. So if anyone's interested, E&E leaders, and the top title is Data Centers Didn't Fail Lake Tahoe, the centralized grid did. So check it out. But Dan, I think that's a really good segue into today's discussion, which is, do you want to be a price maker or a price taker? And how you go about buying these on-site energy systems to ensure that you have access to reliable, affordable, and clean energy. And I think something that caught our eye was on July 14th, PGM, who are the largest grid operator, ran its latest capacity auction. And the price hit the federally approved cap again for the third time. And even at the price that's been agreed, PGM still came in 7 gigawatts short of the capacity they said they wanted to hit their reliability standard. And so it doesn't mean that everyone in their territory, all 67 million people, will immediately see higher bills. But I think what it is showing is, one, prices are going to go up, and two, access to energy isn't necessarily a guarantee.
I actually saw that had there not been the cap that was put in place, that the actual capacity price would have ended up being nearly double what the cap actually is. It was pretty wild, yeah. But I mean, the businesses that control their energy supply, whether it's through on-site generation or energy storage or dedicated contracts, are really going to start separating themselves from the businesses that remain entirely on the grid. And so today, what we're going to be talking about is how you can buy that control and what most companies do in order to lose, arguably, before they even engage with a single supplier and those suppliers ever show up.
Yeah. I think just to round out the story, Dan, so on the PJM front, I don't think this is going to be exclusive to them. I think we're going to see this play out across the country. And so when we think about these capacity auctions, it's essentially the grid's insurance policy that they're going to have enough energy to meet the needs of their customers. And they've committed to generators and other resources to meet these demand peaks. And those costs are currently recovered from electricity customers. And we've spoken about this at length, especially with the likes of Mark Ellis. If you're interested in how the utilities structure their bills, check it out. But in mid-July, the auction for their 2028 through 2029 delivery year cleared that federal approved cap, which you described at $325 per megawatt. Sounds like it would have been double that. This is the third time that this has happened consecutively. And they wanted to actually capture a 20% reserve margin. So this is that insurance premium to ensure that they can hit those demands. But they actually only secured a 14.4% reserve margin, even at that price. So it leaves backup power. There's more need for that backup power than there is capacity available. And other regions, I expect, are going to face these same problems as more power facilities are decommissioned, as transmission interconnections struggle. And so ultimately, PJM has a reserve shortfall.
And the bigger story is how it's actually going to be impacting businesses, which is in the step change in the costs. So the delivery year that began June 2025, PJM increased their annual capacity market cost from roughly $2.2 billion to $14.7 billion, nearly a 7x increase. And the latest auction remained near that elevated level with approximately $16.4 billion, so almost an 8x increase from what it was in pre-2025 times. And so that capacity is only one part of the overall wholesale cost, though.
Yeah. The wholesale power costs in PJM jumped 76% the first quarter of this year compared to the same period last year. And this is where it gets actually quite interesting, because the beginning of June 2027, new data centers requesting access to the grid or exceeding 50 megawatts in demand were essentially told that they would have to reduce their consumption requirements when there were capacity shortages.
So that means the grid operator in the data center capital of the world, this is
Yeah.
the PJM serves the Northern Virginia territory along with Pennsylvania and Ohio and a variety of other places, is effectively telling their largest new customers, you better bring your power to secure it, or accept that, particularly in times of grid constraint, which we've seen several times so far this summer during these heat waves, that you likely won't be able to access the power that you need during these high demand times. So it's pretty remarkable, because the companies that they're telling we're not going to be able to serve you are the ones with basically blank checkbooks, unlimited resources to make this happen.
Yeah. So if it's challenging for them, this is the opportunity for every other business to realize that you're a downstream impactee of this. And where does that leave your facilities, especially not having the resources that they do? And so we see that this alternative time and time again. And we're actually just seeing right now a proposed $100 billion AI campus in Kentucky is not going to take grid power. It's actually building this alongside 2 gigawatts of gas generation and 2.5 gigawatts of battery storage, which is going to be dedicated power for their system, which is bonkers, isn't it? But this is the reality of where we're at, is on-site power is no longer an alternative for all these major new loads. Control over their supply is becoming, a mandatory table stake. And so, Dan, you've got a great analogy for where this is heading. And the Wi-Fi comparison.
It struck me, this was several months ago, but that we were, and it turns out we largely are sitting at a time that was very similar to Wi-Fi or building connectivity about 25 years ago. So in the early 2000s, right around 2000, 2001, about 3% of buildings had Wi-Fi ready to go within the building. And today that's about 98%. It's pretty incomprehensible to walk into a building and not be able to have some level of connectivity. And similarly, in on-site energy systems, we're sitting at a little over 3% of businesses have an on-site energy system. And I believe over the next 25 years, it will follow a similar trend to Wi-Fi, where in the future, it won't be questioned whether or not we will be having on-site energy systems. It'll just be essentially a part of being able to control your own destiny. And the press coverage around this, or at least the storylines, if you will, is really a lot of negativity. Prices up, the grid's constrained, AI is eating everyone's power. Look at what's happening in Tahoe, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
But I think there's a more positive spin on this.
Oh, yeah. The opportunity is amazing, isn't it? Take control of your energy needs, take control of your own consumption opportunities, minimize your costs, increase your reliability, cut your emissions. We talked about even revenue generating opportunities. We had Matthew Plant on last episode talking about demand response. And there's so many ways to monetize this. If you need more power than the grid can deliver, and in the future, this will be on-premises compute because you'll have AI needs, fleet electrification, growing heating and cooling loads. On-site energy is actually probably going to be the only way you're going to get it, because the grid is not going to be able to catch up with our modern day businesses' needs. So for those that are ready to get after it, there's huge opportunities, and we're going to spend this episode talking about how you actually buy these systems in the right way.
So back to the big question: are you going to be a price taker or a price maker? Yeah. So Gareth, you actually just recently published part 1 of a 3-part series on this particular subject. And one of the lines that you shared in it really jumped out at me, and it just simply said, if you don't know what you should be buying, the market will happily decide for you. What did you mean by that?
The market will always optimize for their desired outcomes versus yours. And this is the moment that you can really become a price maker versus the price taker, where they're selling you what they want you to buy versus what you actually need.
And what I often see out there is this stance of let's go get more bids. Let's go get more bids. And really, if that's simply the goal, you end up having to compare different designs, different commercial models, and this push to kind of negotiate harder. But
Yeah.
that seems like a bit of a hard path.
Yeah, we'll talk about this probably in the next episode around like reverse auctions and race to the bottom and buying on the lowest cost or buying on the first person that shows up selling your system. Like ultimately these, different get more bids, negotiate harder, they're all actually downstream questions that don't actually answer the underlying outcome. Like, do you know what you actually want to buy and why you want to buy it? An on-site energy system is not a commodity. This isn't buying toner for your printer. It's not buying a router for your Wi-Fi analogy. This is not software that you can unsubscribe from. This is physical infrastructure that's going to sit on your property for 25 plus years. It's going to be wired into your operations. It's going to impact your balance sheet. It's going to really impact your risk profile positively when done right. But all of these decisions that you make in these first phases of buying the system can compound for decades, and you really need to make sure you get them right.
Yeah, and we'll dig into a couple specific examples here. But one of the things that I find is most buyers assume the pricing game, if you will, is going to be won or lost on hardware. But the thing that most buyers miss is, and we've touched on this before, there's the National Renewable Energy Laboratory research study that found that soft costs, so everything that's not the equipment and the labor, but the things that are consulting and engineering and strategy and permitting and contracts and procurement, they can make anywhere between 30 and 70% of the total cost of a commercial or industrial on-site energy system. Not the panels, not the batteries, not the labor. It's the process of getting from, hey, we think we might need to do something, to an actual operational system. And that's really where there's a lot of opportunity to improve the economics and strip out a lot of the waste.
Yeah, it's a shocking number, isn't it? While solar and batteries have come down over 90% in the last decade in terms of their hardware costs, we certainly haven't seen the cost of these systems when deployed come down at the same rate. And why is this? It's because of all that cost bloat. And I think the reality is with the tax credits, they almost absorbed and hid a lot of these soft costs up until now. But as those incentives tighten, as the market doesn't necessarily need them anymore, as the political stances, you need to operate on your own basis, we now need to really focus on stripping those soft costs out of the system, which means you need to leverage the most important lever within your control, which is taking control of the buying process and knowing what you want to buy and how to buy it.
So let's assume that we've now stripped a ton of the costs out. What if we don't build the right system? What if we build something that's too big or too small? Or maybe we've been doing some of this work with some of our customers that have, one in particular that has over 1,000 projects out in the wild, and you've worked particularly close with them, Gareth. What were some of the findings that on those systems that were already out there?
Yeah, we see this very commonly, don't we, Dan? I think, but the situation you're describing is where, the economics of these systems are immense when you get them right, and when you've got a developer knocking on your door selling you a dream outcome, sometimes it's hard to say no. But the solar developer is always going to sell what they specialize in. And in this case, they filled the customer's roof with solar. But in analyzing the actual site and re-looking at it, they'd installed a system that was double the size that was needed. The solar was performing incredibly. It was exceeding all delivery expectations. The system had been installed well. But there's twice as much panels as there were a need on site. And then the net metering opportunity to sell energy back to the grid was very nominal versus the cost that had been outlaid for the capital of the system. And so it eroded the project's MPV by over 50%. And so it's a real example of right technology, right desired outcome, wrong execution, wrong system, wrong size, and ultimately a very negative financial outcome.
And what I find interesting there is, nobody really did anything necessarily wrong.
No,
The developer didn't lie. They didn't cut corners. They did what they were incentivized to do, which is build a great system. And in that case, there was still really strong economics. It just wasn't as good as it could have been.
that's
And
right.
so really the quiet cost of letting the market define your requirements is that every free consultation that you get, you're probably going to pay that many times over down the road. And it often comes with exclusive arrangements that remove you from being able to receive competitive offers before you've even started or before you've even figured out what you want to do. So let me push back on behalf of the suppliers, though, there, because that was maybe a little gut punch for them, because we've had many of them on the show and they're excellent, and we need them. We need these great suppliers. They know what they're doing. They know what's
Yeah.
best for the customer. Shouldn't the buyer lean on their expertise?
Yeah, the best suppliers do incredible work, and we need them. You know, they're the actual backbone of the whole industry. They get these systems in the ground, and as we said before, and Calvin's favorite line is, "Until there's steel in the ground, you don't gain any of the benefits." And so we need to drive towards that. And so this isn't cynicism about the supply side of the market. It's about the sequencing and process by which we engage with them. And developers and EPCs are experts in what they do, and that's based on the technology they specialize in, the local market they operate in, the financial models that they deploy. We need to make sure that we're going to the right suppliers with the right capabilities that match our needs, because a solar developer is always going to sell you solar. A battery guy is always going to sell you a battery. A gas guy is always going to sell, but maybe you didn't need any of them. Maybe you needed a fuel cell. Like, what is actually the right solution for you? And really understanding your business objectives and fixing the buying sequence is critical. And then suppliers compete on the how versus the what.
Absolutely. Well, so let's make this a bit more tangible and actionable for our listeners here. Really, four things that we should be thinking about before a supplier sees your project. So, what do buyers need to own, Gareth?
Yeah. So the first thing that's an absolute priority is, like, why are you doing this? Are you doing it for economic reasons? Are you doing it for power reliability reasons or energy access? Is it about sustainability? You need to really understand what your business driver is and weight it accordingly. What's more important than the other? What would you like as a tertiary outcome or a secondary benefit, but what is your priority? So this is all about, are you cutting costs or protecting uptime or hitting your sustainability commitment, or all three? That answer shapes everything downstream: the technology mix, the contract structure, which suppliers you go to. And it's super important to know your why before the what and the how.
And once you know that, then you can move on to the second most critical item, which is determining what the most optimal system is. It's not a guess. You're able to arrive at this answer through a digital model that you can test, you can scenario plan, you can try to look into your crystal ball and say, okay, well, if utility costs rise less than the market expects or more than the market expects, how does that change my optimal system? But you need to account for your load profile, so how you consume electricity at that particular property, the tariff structures with the utility that serves that particular building, the roof and the land constraints, the renewables potential, access to gas, the outage risks, the incentives, the equipment and installation costs, cost of capital. Like, there's a lot that goes into this. There's a lot of different factors to determine what is the right system, what's the right commercial model before anybody bids. And this used to take months. It used to take months of expert consultants using very complex spreadsheets to try to pull this together. But now, I mean, we're able to do this on the VECKTA platform, pulling together over 5,000 data points per facility to configure a system automatically. And those estimates have been proven to be within 10% plus or minus of actual market bids with essentially no customer data. It does get even better as we start to get their actual facility consumption, their utility tariffs. Comes down to more like 3 or 5% from the market bids. And really, the point is not the tool. The point is the posture that you can take with the market when you are asking for something that you know will meet your needs, and not asking them to try to help you figure out what those needs are and what will fill those needs.
Yeah, exactly. Now you're completely in control, aren't you? You know what you need, what you want. You know what a good deal should look like. And all of that should happen before the suppliers in the market even know your name. They know you're interested in this. This is your responsibility to figure this out and ensure that you know exactly what it is that you want to buy and why you want to buy it. So then the third thing is making sure when you're ready to come to market, you have an exceptionally good data room, because garbage data in, garbage data out, it's the same as in many other industries. And this is your utility bills, your load data, your as-built drawings, the condition of your roof, your electrical infrastructure, having your own energy model, and your financial expectations. Once you've got all that, then you're starting to look very organized and very, very ready to go to market.
And once you have an understanding of all of the different data, and if you haven't already landed on a commercial model, some companies really standardize on power purchase agreements. Others say that we only want to do cash purchases. You can also look at loans, leases, a variety of different other things. But really what you want to make sure is that the CFO or whoever's in charge of the budgets are going to approve this. And each of these carries different trade-offs with control, balance sheet impacts, the risks. And so if a supplier cannot structure the deal the way your finance team needs it, no headline price will ever save the project. And this is also one of the biggest decisions that decides which suppliers are a fit for that particular project. If you're looking at a cash purchase, on-site energy developers that solely offer energy as a service or power purchase agreements simply won't be a fit. And I think people underestimate this. And so, like, all of this preparation, what does that do to the other side of the table?
Yeah, I think what we've seen in our experience is something incredible happens is actually suppliers take you seriously. And I think the reality is the best suppliers in the market are always busy, and they're busy because they're very good at what they do. And you're not going to get the attention of the best suppliers if you're not organized, if you're not legitimate, if you have not got a quality project that you want quotes for. And the reality is that tight data-rich brief from the buyer, who clearly knows what they want, attracts the attention of the A teams. And a vague response and a vague request to the market not only sets you up to be sold to and become a price taker, but it also can result in you actually not getting a good response at all. And we see this across the marketplace every week. When we do this right, we get 100% bid response rates. We get the right number of qualified, certified suppliers bidding on the projects. We get high quality bids within weeks instead of months or years. And ultimately, it cuts the cost of these systems by up to 45%, which is good for the whole market. The buyer gets a great outcome. The supplier wins a job. The cost of these systems comes down, which makes more people interested. And then we create this thriving ecosystem where everyone wins. And then by creating that, we get speed to market, we get organizational buy-in, and we see great projects getting built that are bought on value, not lowest cost.
And again, this all comes back to taking control of the process. There's kind of two major components here. There's taking control of your energy by deciding to deploy an on-site energy system in the first place. And then the second is taking control of the entire process. And if we zoom back out before we close out here, Gareth, I want to connect back to something that you opened Powering Profits, your book with, and I think it's particularly appropriate given our show here is called Renewable Rides. You went on a big bike ride in Bolivia. Maybe you can tell our listeners about this.
Yeah, there's a famous road called the Death Road, and it's the Death Road because it's sheer cliffs on one side of it, and unfortunately people fall over the side. But I think what stuck with me was, when you're riding downhill, it's super exhilarating because you're in control of the process. You're on the bike, you're riding down this road, you've got great views, it's all under control. But when you get to the bottom, it's now time to go back to the top, and you pack your bikes on the bus, you get on the bus, and then someone else is now driving you uphill. You're in this rickety old thing, and I was on the side of the bus looking over the 2,000-foot drop on the edge. And it just made me realize that I really did not like that experience at all. I was putting all of my trust in someone else's hands. And for us, luckily, we got to the top. For many, they don't. And I think the analogy to the energy industry is, for the last century, we've been coasting downhill. Energy was abundant, it was affordable, and it was easy to take for granted. And now we're on this grind uphill we've got aging infrastructure, we've outsourced the most precious input to our business. Meanwhile, outages are up 64% in the last decade. It's costing our economy $150 billion a year. Retail electric prices up 70% since the early 2000s. And, that's even on top of the cost of generating the energy having fallen. And so for me, this is just a really good example for you to think about is, do you want to be in control of the process, or do you want to have your rickety bus driver in control?
And more, this is moving from just the energy conversation is moving from an energy cost line item that just gets paid every month to a board level conversation. And the companies that treat it as that, as a strategic initiative or a strategic lever, are really going to be seeing very different economics and very different long-term outcomes in the coming years and decades.
Yeah, we shared a really interesting case study in the book where one of our customers asked us to run a portfolio analysis and a strategy for 186 of their sites. And we identified 113 being economically viable for on-site energy. But the key here is, if you'd have just gone out and bought each one of these sites individually, you'd have spent in excess of $160 million across all of these capital investments. But by assessing the portfolio as a whole, optimizing the deployment plan, creating the strategy as we've just discussed in those 4 key points, you can actually then compress the net investment to $20 million over 3 years, because you can reinvest all of those cost savings back into future investments. But it unlocks $1.1 billion worth of energy savings over the life of these assets. So same site, same technology, very different buying posture, very different capital strategy. And that's the key, is understanding what your options are and going to market with that clear picture.
And for the CFOs listening, these savings don't just sit in the utility budget, they flow straight to the bottom line. And this is why we keep saying that the winning frame is more around fiduciary. It's not about a sustainability conversation that happens to save money. It's margin, risk, and enterprise value conversation that happens to be sustainable and might help you grow the business as well. But It's really more of the core of the business there. So let's bring it home, Gareth. If a listener was to ask you one thing to take from this episode in the next meeting, what would you tell them?
Yeah, a competitive process without those clear specifications and expectations is just organized confusion. If you've got more bids, or if you're negotiating harder against a vague brief, you're just comparing more incomparable PDFs that you're going to receive from your suppliers. You don't have more leverage. So before you go to market, make sure you own those 4 things: your outcomes, your system, your data, and the money story. And that will really set you apart and make sure that you are a price maker versus a taker.
And this is part 1 of a series, as I mentioned, that we'll be coming out with in the coming weeks. Part 2 is actually now live on your Substack. It's called Curation Before Competition. And these are not commodity purchases, as you talked about before. Really how you curate the right suppliers and run a process that creates the real competitive tension in weeks, not quarters or years. And part 3 closes out the series. And if you want a full written playbook, you can find it all at poweringprofits.substack.com, or also order the Powering Profits book, where we have a lot of this information as well.
Yeah, so that's it, Dan. I think really interesting times. I'd encourage anyone who is really interested in this to check out the content, reach out to us with any questions. Control your own destiny. Don't be grinding uphill on that rickety bus. And we'll see you next time.
Sounds like a plan. Good stuff, Gareth.
Cheers, Dan.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.